In this video, we're going to be talking about perceiving and presenting the self, coming underneath this overarching form of communication called intrapersonal communication. Now, let's remember before we jump into the messages in this video that when we're talking about this form of communication, we need to remember that we are doing this for our own intentions and not for others. So even though we'll be talking about presenting the self, all of that is coming back to who we think we are and how we are communicating with other people. Now, when we're engaging in interpersonal communication, that means that we are communicating with ourselves. That might manifest as talking out loud or just thinking things in our head about what we're going through or how we're reacting to something. But either way, we are having these messages for our own intents and purposes to grow, to learn, or to provide encouragement to ourselves about how we're going about our day or what we think about interactions that we've had with others. Interpersonal communication can take various forms. So we could be communicating with ourselves about physiological things going on with us, like I'm really hungry or I'm super tired or I'm really cranky right now. We could be having intrapersonal communications with ourselves about reflections of our day. So that was a really great day, or I had a really great interaction with someone. Or we could be communicating encouragement to ourselves, or even having sometimes where we're hard on ourselves for what we've done in the past. But more so than not, our intrapersonal communication is in response to something. We're reacting to something and thinking in our head how we're viewing that situation, how we're viewing that interaction, and what that might do for future interactions with other people. When we are reacting interpersonally to something, this all harkens back to the perception process. Now, this was something that you read about in our course text this week in thinking about these 3 steps that are important in perceiving our world, organizing it, and interpreting what it might mean. So let's run through really quickly that perception process. The first thing that happens when we're perceiving other people or when we're perceiving the world around us is that we first are selecting pieces of information to hold on to. Now, the selection process is pretty particular to who we are and maybe some biases that we bring to a situation, in that we're not selecting everything in our environment to pay attention to and react to, but we're selecting things that might be important to us, things that are salient, things that stand out, and we're grabbing a hold of those things and trying to figure out how that changes or influences the situation that we are in. Once we've selected information, we then try to organize it and make sense of it. Maybe something that you have seen or something that you've gone through is similar to something in your past experience. And so you're organizing what is happening to you currently from the perspective of something that has happened to you prior. Once we've done that, we then interpret how we feel about that situation or that conversation or that person. And thinking about then, how do we make sense of what's happening and whether it's something good or something bad? Through all of that process, which happens really quickly and cognitively, we come out of a situation then thinking about how we interact or how we feel about that situation with other people, which can come back to give us a lot of information about who we are intrapersonally. When we take all of this into consideration, we want to be asking ourselves the question, what do I hope that other people select about me from conversations with others? So as you're interacting with individuals, when you're stepping into a conversation, thinking about that perception process and thinking, what is it about myself that I want other people to see as important or salient, and select that to then have more ideas about who I am, to have further conversations, and to think more deeply about what a relationship might look like with me in a variety of different ways. So when we start to think about who we are and how we perceive ourselves, we really need to think about impression formation, because how we view who we are is going to manifest interpersonally with other people. We'll talk about interpersonal communication next week and thinking about how, when we interact with other people, what are we bringing to that situation that is intrapersonal, that is really influencing how we're interacting with another individual, and is really circling back to thinking about who we are and how that's influencing a situation. So there are a couple of different vocabulary-like terms that I want you to be thinking about this week and trying to figure out who you are and how you bring that aspect of yourself into an interpersonal communication situation, which we'll talk about next week. The first one of those terms is the self-concept. This is an idea of who you are holistically. Thinking inwardly about what you bring to a situation, about what you value, about what you're trying to attain, and really asking yourself the question, who am I? When I think back on my undergraduate college years, I'm not sure that I had the answer to that question. And I want to encourage you in thinking about understanding the self-concept as a journey and as possibly changing over time. So thinking about who you are, this is a particularly formative time in trying to figure out what matters to you and how you're thinking about that and conceptualizing that to then bring it into relationships with other people. So as you're walking through these next couple years at Fox and thinking about who you are, remember that you have to be true to thinking about what that means for you and also thinking about how it can connect to other people. The second concept is self-esteem. So when we think about self-concept, what we're doing is we're kind of more objectively answering the question, who am I? You're saying, I am this type of person, or this is what matters to me. But with self-esteem, what you're doing is you're putting a judgment on that idea. You're saying, I really like that this is who I am, or I don't really like that this is who I am right now. And you're putting an evaluation for yourself on what that self-concept might be. So in thinking about who you are, there might be pieces of yourself right now that you don't particularly like or love. And your hope then is to maybe change those things about how you interact with the world, about how you interact with yourself, to move into places where you feel more confident and you feel more positive about who it is that you are. So thinking about self-esteem and that positive or negative judgment of who you are is really important too. The third concept is self-efficacy. This one is getting a bit more at what you perceive you're able to do. So in thinking about who you are and then how you feel about that thing, those are two really important pieces. But you also want to think about your perceived ability to go and do things that might relate back to communication scenarios too. And what is fostering relationships? What is fostering personal growth? And what might be cutting that short? So when you think about self-efficacy, you want to be thinking about, how do I feel I'm able to move in this situation? And one thing that we've already been talking about in this class is your self-efficacy when it comes to interacting with others in conversational moments, in public speaking moments, maybe online or in written communication. And some of you have outrightly said, I am horrible at this. I do not have this ability. And maybe that's why you're taking this class. You're wanting to figure out, how can I get better and have more self-efficacy in public speaking or in communicating during conflict? And those are really good things to know. They're really good things to be able to name so that you can figure out where your growth points are, or also bring some really good moments of strength into communication scenarios too. And lastly, we said that this video was about perceiving the self, but also presenting the self. And so when we think about interpersonal communication, which we'll get into next week, we need to think about how all of these things that we're thinking about ourselves, our self-concept, our self-efficacy, our self-esteem, how do those manifest in our interactions with other people? How do we present who we are through how we communicate with others? So when we're thinking about self-presentation, there's this sense of freedom, but also this sense of responsibility for how you interact with other people, because you are in charge of what you say, of how you behave, of how you react to things. And yes, other people are going to engage in that perception process of those instances, but you are in charge of what information you're kind of releasing. And so in interpersonal communication, we'll talk about how self-disclosure is really important in thinking about what you say to other people, how you react to situations, how much information you divulge about who you are is really important in connecting with others, but you are in charge of presenting that information. And so as we're kind of navigating through interpersonal communication and thinking about who am I and how do I want to be in connection and communication and relationship with others, you can be thinking about what parts of you are you presenting, and what parts of you are you hiding a little bit right now or not willing to present? And what is that doing for your communication with other people? So this is a lot of like meta communication, right? You're trying to figure out, who am I? How am I interacting with other people? Why does this matter? But these things are foundational to all of the other types of communication that we're going to talk about. Because as you're interpersonally communicating or communicating in a small group or giving a public speech, if you don't know who you are, if you don't know how you feel about yourself, if you don't know how you're able or not able to do something or what you're hoping other people to see from you, that is going to directly influence how you communicate in that situation. So this week is a lot of meta communication, it's a lot of reflection, but I think it's going to be really foundational in how you engage in the content over the rest of the semester. So I encourage you to dig in, to dive deep, and to really be thinking about who you are.